My parents lied about the day of our flight, so I missed our trip to Hawaii. But karma hit them hard. I woke up, suitcase packed, heart racing with excitement, only to find out my family had left for Hawaii without me. And worse, they planned it that way. They took my money, lied to my face, and thought I'd just accept it. But what they didn't see coming was my revenge. What happens when the family's golden child finally fights back? Stay tuned, because this is a story of betrayal, exposure, and the moment I took my life back. You won't believe how it ends. I woke up that morning with excitement buzzing through my veins. My suitcase was packed, my itinerary was set, and in just a few hours, I would be on a plane to Hawaii, ready to soak in the sun, unwind, and finally spend some quality time with my family. It wasn't just a vacation, it was a long overdue chance to reconnect, to feel like I truly belonged. I had spent the last few months drowning in work, pushing myself beyond my limits to provide for everyone, to make sure my parents were comfortable, to support my sister's never-ending dreams. But this trip was supposed to be different. It was supposed to be about all of us, together, no obligations, no strings attached. Just a real family vacation, that's what they had promised me. That's what I had believed. I checked the clock. Still plenty of time before my flight. I pulled up my phone to go over my travel details one last time, scrolling through my messages. There it was, Mom's text from last week. Flights at 2 p.m. on the 15th. I smiled, shaking my head. They always acted like I was the forgetful one, the one who needed reminders. But I was organized to a fault. I had triple-checked everything, made sure I had the right day off work, even wired them extra money to help cover the resort. I had done everything right. But then, my phone buzzed a call from my mom. That was strange. She should have been at the airport by now. Maybe she was just checking in on me, making sure I was on my way. I swiped to answer, already reaching for my carry-on. "Hey, Mom, I'm just about to leave." Her voice cut through the line, cheerful and way too casual. "Oh, sweetheart, we're in Honolulu. Why didn't you come to the airport yesterday?" I froze. My grip on the handle tightened. "What?" My heartbeat pounded in my ears, drowning out the noise around me. Mom let out a little laugh, the kind that always made me feel like I was being ridiculous. "Oh, honey, there must have been some confusion. Your sister made it just fine. We're all settled in at the resort, Amy." Of course Amy made it. The favorite. The golden child. I pulled the phone away from my ear, my fingers trembling as I scrolled frantically through my texts. The message was right there, the 15th. Today. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't mistaken. I had been given the wrong date. They had given me the wrong date. My voice came out quieter this time, controlled but sharp. This wasn't a mistake, was it? Silence. Then the fake sympathy, the forced kindness. "Sweetheart, don't be so dramatic. These things happen." I felt like the floor had been ripped out from under me. The reality of it hit me all at once. They had planned this. They had intentionally left me behind. After everything I had done for them, after years of bending over backward, giving them my time, my money, my energy, they had decided I wasn't even worth a plane ticket. My throat burned, but I refused to let my voice shake. "You lied to me." Mom sighed like I was exhausting her. "Jocelyn, you're making a big deal out of nothing. We didn't think you'd mind. You work so much. We figured maybe it was for the best." For the best. For who? I stood there, phone pressed to my ear, surrounded by travelers rushing past me, hugging their loved ones, laughing, checking into their flights. I should have been on one of those planes. Instead, I was here alone, humiliated, discarded like an afterthought. I clenched my jaw, willing my tears to stay put. Not here. Not now. "Enjoy your vacation," I said coldly before hanging up. I dropped my phone onto the airport bench and buried my face in my hands. The sheer betrayal of it all burned through me like wildfire. How had I been so blind? How had I convinced myself that this time would be different? I had given them everything. paid their bills, covered their emergencies, funded this trip. I had put my own dreams on hold, sacrificed my own stability, thinking that someday they'd see me. That someday I'd be more than just a wallet to them. But they had never really cared. Not about me. I inhaled sharply, my mind racing through every moment I had let slide, the times they had forgotten to invite me to family events, the last-minute cancellations, the times I had felt like a stranger in my own home. How many times had I made excuses for them? How many times had I told myself that it wasn't on purpose, that they loved me in their own way? But love wasn't supposed to feel like this. My phone buzzed again. A text from Amy. Wish you could have made it. Maybe next time. The sheer audacity made my hands tremble. Like this was some accident. Like this was my fault. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. I could feel the anger rising, boiling over, mixing with the hurt until all that remained was resolve. They thought I'd just take it. That I'd cry a little, get over it, and go back to paying for their lives. They were wrong. This wasn't just about a missed trip. This was years of being taken advantage of. Years of being the afterthought while they drained me dry. And now, I sat in my car outside the airport, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. My mind was racing, playing back every conversation, every moment leading up to this. I had been so sure this trip was real, I had trusted them, again. And now, they were sipping cocktails on a beach in Hawaii, acting like this was just a little misunderstanding. Acting like I wouldn't care. I checked my phone again, scrolling through my texts. I needed to see it. Needed proof that I wasn't imagining this. There it was, my mother's message. Flights at 2 p.m. on the 15th. And yet, just hours ago, she had laughed as she told me they were already in Honolulu. I felt sick. It wasn't the missed trip that gutted me. It was the deliberate nature of it, the planning, the decision to lie to me, to exclude me, to use my money to do it. I clicked open Amy's Instagram. The first thing I saw was a picture, them at the airport, yesterday, boarding passes in hand, smiling. My breath hitched. The caption, Hawaii, here we come. So excited for this family trip. The words felt like a slap. I swiped through the photos, my vision blurring with fury. There they were, sitting in first class, drinks in hand. First class. After years of them crying about money, begging for help, convincing me to send them thousands to keep things afloat, there they were, flying in luxury on a vacation I had helped pay for. The rage inside me hardened into something cold. I wasn't just hurt. I was done. I had spent years being the responsible one. Years covering for their mistakes, fixing their problems, cleaning up their messes, paying bills, covering debts, keeping them from losing everything because I was the only one who could. I had sacrificed so much. My savings, my time, my peace of mind, all for a family that had never once thought of me as a priority. And now they had proven just how little I meant to them. I sat there for a long time, my phone clutched in my shaking hands, the weight of everything pressing down on me. Then my phone buzzed. Amy. A picture popped up. Her, mom, dad, at the resort. Sunset behind them, drinks raised. The caption, missing you, sis. Wish you could have made it. I snapped. I didn't even think. My fingers moved on their own, calling her. She picked up after 2 rings, her voice bright. Fake. Hey, Jocelyn. Oh my God, we were just talking about you. Isn't the resort gorgeous? You're gonna love it when you get here, when I get there? My voice came out low, dangerous. Amy hesitated. Wait, aren't you? I laughed. A sharp, bitter sound. You knew. A pause. I could hear her thinking, scrambling. Knew what? You knew they gave me the wrong flight date. You knew they planned to leave without me. Silence. Then a nervous chuckle. Jaws, that's ridiculous. Why would we? I cut her off. Stop. Just stop. I took a breath, forcing my voice to stay steady. I saw your Instagram. I saw the airport photos. You flew out yesterday. Another pause. Then the fake sweetness melted. "Look, Joss, I don't know what you want me to say." I squeezed my eyes shut. "I want the truth," she sighed, exasperated, like I was the problem. "Okay, fine. Yes, we left yesterday. Mom and Dad figured. I mean, they thought maybe it'd be better this way." "Better?" My stomach turned. "Better for who, Amy?" She didn't answer. I let out a humorless laugh. "Unbelievable. You guys used my money to pay for this trip, and then you decided I wasn't even worth inviting." "It's not like that." I clenched my jaw. "No? Then explain it to me." Another pause. Then, in a voice so casual it made me sick, she said, "Joss, you work all the time. We just thought maybe you wouldn't even notice." Something inside me snapped. I gripped the phone, my hands shaking. "You thought I wouldn't notice? Are you serious? You really think that little of me?" "Oh my God, Joss, don't be so dramatic. It's just a trip. Just a trip." I inhaled sharply. This wasn't just a trip. This was years of being the afterthought. Years of being used. Of being expected to give and give and give and never expect anything in return. "I hope you enjoy it, Amy," I said, my voice cold. "Because it's the last thing you're ever getting from me." She scoffed. "Oh, come on. What does that even mean?" I didn't answer. I just hung up. I sat there, staring at my phone, my heart pounding. Then, slowly, I started making calls. First to my bank, then to my credit card company, then to my landlord just to double-check that my rent was up to date, because God only knew what else they had been using my money for. By the time I was done, I had taken back control of every financial account, shut down every automatic transfer I had set up for them, cut off every single lifeline they had to my money. And it felt good. It felt like freedom, because for the first time in my life, I wasn't going to let them take from me anymore. They thought I'd just accept this, that I'd forgive them, that I'd move on like I always did. But they were about to learn something very important about me. I don't forget. And this time, I don't forgive. They thought I'd cry, beg, and move on like I always did. But this time, I had proof bank records, fraudulent charges, and a paper trail that would ruin them. Now, I had a choice. Should I press charges and make them pay, or cut them off and watch their world crumble? What would you do? Comment 1 if you'd go full legal, or 2 if you'd let them drown in their own mess. Let's see who's really on my side. I sat in my apartment, staring at my phone, my mind still reeling from the conversation with Amy. I could still hear her voice, laced with casual indifference, like this was nothing. Like they hadn't just cut me out on purpose. Like they hadn't stolen my money, lied to my face, and then had the audacity to act like I was overreacting. My pulse pounded in my ears as I scrolled through my bank app, double-checking every automatic transfer I had canceled. No more money for their mortgage, no more bills covered, no more handouts. I had spent years believing that if I just helped them enough, if I just gave a little more, they would finally see me, finally appreciate me. But that was a lie. The truth was, they had never seen me as family only a resource. And now, that resource was gone. I exhaled sharply, setting my phone down and running my hands through my hair. My whole body was tense, my muscles aching from the sheer force of holding back my rage. I needed to do something. I needed a plan. Because cutting them off financially wasn't enough. They needed to understand what they had done, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't going to be the one left picking up the pieces. I grabbed my laptop and started typing. First, I pulled up my credit report. I needed to make sure they hadn't done more damage than I already knew about. As the page loaded, my stomach twisted into knots. There it was, a credit card under my name, a balance of over $7,500. I felt my breath hitch, my vision blurring for a second. My own parents, they had opened a credit card in my name? Without telling me, without my consent? The anger that had been simmering inside me exploded. I stood up so fast my chair scraped against the hardwood floor. My hands were shaking as I paced my living room. my mind racing. They had stolen from me. Not just my time, not just my trust, but actual, tangible money. And they thought they could get away with it. I grabbed my phone and dialed my mother. She picked up on the second ring, her voice syrupy sweet. "Jocelyn, honey, are you okay? You sounded so upset earlier." I clenched my jaw. "Did you open a credit card in my name?" Silence. Then, an exaggerated sigh. "Sweetheart, why are you being so? Did you open a credit card in my name?" I repeated, my voice sharp as a knife. Another pause. Then a forced chuckle. "Jocelyn, it's not a big deal. We needed a little extra help. And you're always so responsible with money. It's not like we were going to let it get out of hand." I laughed. I couldn't help it. It was a cold, hollow sound. "Not a big deal? You committed fraud. Do you even hear yourself?" She huffed. "Now, don't be dramatic. You act like we stole from you." My fingers curled into a fist. "You did steal from me. You used my name. You put thousands of dollars in debt under my name without telling me." "Well, we were going to pay it back," she muttered, her tone suddenly defensive. "We just needed a little cushion. You make good money, Jocelyn. What's the problem?" The problem? The problem was that they saw my success as theirs to take. I took a deep breath, forcing my voice to stay level. "I already reported it as fraud. The bank is investigating. You have until the end of the week to pay off that balance, or they'll press charges." A sharp inhale. "Then you wouldn't." I smiled, but there was nothing warm about it. "Try me." Her voice turned shrill. "Jocelyn, we're your parents. Families help each other. We raised you. We took care of you for years, and I repaid you 100 times over." My voice was ice. "I paid your bills. I covered your mortgage. I sent you thousands of dollars to keep you from drowning. And what did I get in return? Lies? Manipulation? Fraud? Sweetheart, please," she begged, her voice suddenly softer. "Don't do this. We're family." I felt something break inside me, because that word family didn't mean anything when it came from her. "Not anymore," I said quietly. I hung up. My whole body was trembling, my breath coming fast. They weren't going to stop. They were never going to stop, but I had given them their last chance. I went back to my laptop, my fingers moving quickly as I filed an official fraud claim. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about taking back my life. I sat at my kitchen table, my hands gripping my phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. The air around me felt heavy, suffocating, as if the very walls of my apartment were closing in. My mother's last words echoed in my head. "We're family." I wanted to scream, to throw my phone across the room, to punch something, anything, just to release the sheer rage boiling in my veins. They had stolen from me, lied to me, used me. And when confronted, they had the audacity to act like I was the villain. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to think. Anger was dangerous if left unchecked. I needed to channel it, to make sure they felt the consequences of what they had done. I grabbed my laptop and pulled up my financial records again. The fraudulent credit card wasn't the only thing I needed to handle. I scrolled through transaction after transaction, all the money I had given them. Rent, utility bills, emergency cash, the vacation they took without me. All those years of sacrificing my own needs, my own dreams, just to keep them afloat. And for what? For them to discard me like I was nothing? Not anymore. I reached for my phone and dialed my bank. The moment an agent picked up, I launched into it. "Hi, I need to report fraudulent activity on my credit account." The woman on the other end was calm and professional as she asked for my details. But the moment I told her who had opened the card, my stomach twisted. "And do you have any suspicion as to who may have accessed your information?" she asked. I swallowed hard. "Yes, my parents." There was a pause, a small, knowing pause. "I see," she said carefully. "Unfortunately, fraud cases involving family members are more common than you might think." I almost laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Common? Maybe. But that didn't make it any less sickening. I answered all her questions, confirming every fraudulent charge. By the time I was done, my heart was pounding. "And what happens next?" I asked, my voice tight. "The bank will conduct an investigation," she said. "If we find sufficient evidence, we'll report it to the authorities. Would you like to pursue legal action if necessary?" My breath caught in my throat. Would I? Would I really take this all the way? My mother's words flashed in my mind. "We're family. But family doesn't steal from you. Family doesn't lie to you. Family doesn't throw you away like you're worthless." I clenched my jaw. "Yes. If they don't pay back every cent, I want to press charges." There was no hesitation in my voice. I had made my choice. After I hung up, I sat back, exhaling slowly. My hands were still shaking, but I felt something shift inside me, a sense of control. For the first time in years, I wasn't just reacting. I wasn't just taking it. I was fighting back. And that was when my phone buzzed. "Amy." I hesitated before answering. "Jocelyn," she said immediately, her voice unusually cautious. "Mom just called me. She's freaking out." I smirked. "Good. Let her." "And?" She said, "You reported the credit card," Amy said slowly. She swears it was just a misunderstanding. That you're overreacting. That you're trying to ruin their lives. My smirk vanished. I closed my eyes, gripping the phone tighter. They ruined their own lives. Amy sighed. "I know. But they're panicking. Dad's saying you're going to get them arrested. Mom is sobbing, saying she doesn't understand why you're doing this." I let out a bitter laugh. Oh, now she doesn't understand? She seemed to understand just fine when she was maxing out a credit card in my name. Amy was quiet. And then, in a softer voice, she said, "I think she's scared, Joss." "Good." She let out a slow breath. "So, what now?" I stood up, looking out my window at the city lights beyond. Now? Now they realize they can't keep using me. Amy hesitated. "And if they don't?" I smiled, cold and sharp. "Then they'll learn the hard way." Because this time, I wasn't backing down. I sat in my apartment, my fingers drumming against the kitchen table as I stared at my phone. The messages had stopped. The calls had gone silent. It had been over an hour since my last conversation with Amy, and for the first time in years, my parents weren't trying to manipulate me into submission. But I wasn't naive enough to believe that meant they had given up. No, this was just the calm before the storm. I glanced at the stack of papers beside me, printouts of bank statements, credit card transactions, text messages confirming every lie they had ever told me. I had been digging into every financial record I could find, uncovering one betrayal after another, and the deeper I went, the uglier it got. My parents hadn't just stolen from me. They had built their entire lifestyle on my money. I scrolled through my bank history again, my stomach twisting. Thousands of dollars, month after month. The payments I had made to cover their mortgage, their emergencies, their vacations. Money I had wired directly into their account, trusting them when they said they needed help. And now I knew the truth. They had been spending it on themselves. Lavish dinners, shopping sprees. Amy's flight to Hawaii had been fully paid for with my money. I gritted my teeth, my grip tightening around my phone. They had never needed my help. They had just needed a fool willing to bankroll their lies. And that fool had been me. Not anymore. My phone buzzed. I flinched, expecting another desperate plea from my mother. But when I looked at the screen, my stomach dropped. Dad. I hesitated. I had ignored his last 5 calls, but something told me this one was different. I exhaled sharply and answered. His voice was low, measured, but there was an edge to it, one I recognized all too well. "Jocelyn." I said nothing. He sighed, a long, exaggerated breath, like he was already tired of dealing with me. "I don't know what you think you're doing, but you need to stop." I clenched my jaw. "Stop what?" This tantrum," he snapped. "You think you're proving something by cutting us off? You think this is going to make you feel better?" I let out a slow, bitter laugh. No, Dad. What's going to make me feel better is knowing you'll finally face the consequences of what you did. Silence. Then, a sharp intake of breath. You have no idea what you're talking about. Oh, I don't? I challenged. Then explain why I found a second mortgage in your name, one that's been months behind on payments. Another beat of silence. A silence so heavy I could hear the panic in it. Finally, he scoffed. I don't know where you're getting your information, but you're out of line. We've done nothing wrong. I could almost see his face, the same self-righteous sneer he always wore when he thought he could talk his way out of something. But this time, I wasn't a scared little girl desperate for his approval. I was his worst nightmare. I leaned forward, my voice dangerously calm. You stole from me. You lied to me. And now you want to pretend like none of it happened? I exhaled sharply. You know what, Dad? I'm done talking. A flicker of real panic crept into his voice. Jocelyn, don't be ridiculous. I hung up, and for the first time in my entire life, I felt nothing. No guilt, no fear, just relief. I stared at my phone, my heart still racing, but I wasn't trembling anymore. The moment of hesitation was gone. The small, foolish part of me that had wanted to believe they would change had finally died. I picked up my laptop, my fingers moving fast as I logged into my accounts. First, I froze every bank account they had access to. Next, I pulled up my credit report, making sure they hadn't opened anything else in my name. Then, I locked down my savings. By the time I was done, they had nothing left to take from me. I sat back, exhaling slowly. The next move was theirs, and no matter what it was, I would be ready. I sat in my car outside my apartment, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. The silence around me felt suffocating, but inside my head, a storm was raging. I had spent the last few hours cutting every financial tie my parents had to me locking my accounts, freezing my credit, securing every last dollar they thought they had access to. And now I was waiting for the moment they realized I had finally wised up, that I wasn't their pawn anymore. My phone sat on the passenger seat, dark and silent, but I knew it wouldn't stay that way for long. My father's last call had ended in panic, his voice tinged with a level of fear I had never heard before. Not because he was worried about me. No, because for the first time in his life, he wasn't in control. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself, but my mind kept circling back to the same thought. How long had they been planning this? How long had they been funneling my money into their debts, their vacations, their lies? Had they ever actually cared about me? Or had I just been a walking ATM in their eyes from the moment I landed my first high-paying job? I reached for my phone, my thumb hovering over my banking app. I had checked everything a dozen times, but my paranoia wouldn't let me stop. Just as I was about to tap in, my phone buzzed violently, an unknown number flashing across the screen. I stared at it, my pulse picking up speed. I knew. I just knew. I let it ring, my gut twisting as I debated whether to pick up. But before I could decide, another call came through. Then another. Then a text. Mom, Jocelyn, please. Pick up. We need to talk. I scoffed. Now she wanted to talk? After years of ignoring my calls unless she needed something? After lying to my face about our Hawaii trip, about my money, about everything, I was supposed to just pick up like nothing had happened? No. Not this time. Another call. Then a voicemail. Against my better judgment, I hit play. Her voice came through, choking on fake tears. Sweetheart, I don't know what's gotten into you, but you're making a huge mistake. Your father and I were struggling. We're your parents. We did everything for you. And now, you're turning your back on us? A shaky breath. Your father isn't well, Jocelyn. The stress is too much for him. Do you really want that on your conscience? I clenched my jaw so hard it ached. There it was. The guilt trip. The emotional blackmail. It always came back to that, didn't it? Whenever they needed me, whenever they had screwed up beyond repair, it was always my responsibility to fix it, to save them. to sacrifice myself for the family. But not this time. I hit delete and tossed my phone onto the seat beside me. Then I started my car. I didn't know exactly where I was going, but I knew I couldn't just sit here. Not while my blood was boiling. Not while the weight of years of manipulation threatened to drown me. So I drove. 30 minutes later, I found myself parked outside a quiet diner on the edge of town. One of those old school places with red leather booths and checkered floors. The kind of spot where people nursed cups of coffee for hours. I didn't even remember making the decision to come here, but my body had taken me somewhere safe. Somewhere I could think. I stepped inside, the scent of fresh coffee wrapping around me like a blanket. The waitress behind the counter glanced up, smiling warmly. "Grab a seat anywhere, honorable." "I'll be right with you." I nodded, sliding into a booth in the farthest corner. My hands were still shaking. My mind was still racing. I needed to breathe. I needed to think. But before I could even wrap my head around what came next, my phone buzzed again. Amy. I hesitated. Unlike our parents, she hadn't tried to manipulate me. She hadn't fed me some rehearsed lie. She had sounded genuinely shocked when she realized what was happening. I exhaled and answered, "Joss, thank God." Her voice was frantic. "Mom and Dad are losing it. They're saying you froze their accounts." What the hell is going on? I swallowed the bitter taste in my mouth. "I froze my accounts, Amy. The ones they've been draining for years." She went quiet. Then, a hesitant, "What?" "They stole from me, Amy," I said, my voice steady despite the storm brewing in my chest. "They opened a credit card in my name. They maxed it out. They took out a second mortgage on the house. They've been bleeding me dry while pretending they were struggling." I let out a sharp breath, and I let them. I was so desperate to be a good daughter, to finally be included, that I didn't even see it. Amy sucked in a breath. "Oh my God." I let out a humorless laugh. "Yeah, that about sums it up." Another pause. "Then, Joss, they told me you were just overreacting, that you were punishing them for a simple mistake." I felt my stomach tighten. "And do you believe them?" She didn't answer right away. Then, finally, in a small, hesitant voice, number relief slammed into me so hard. I almost dropped the phone, because for the first time in years, someone in my family was seeing them for who they really were. "Amy," I said carefully, "you need to check your accounts, your credit, everything. If they did this to me, they might have done it to you too." A shaky breath. "I will." I leaned forward, my elbows resting on the diner table. "And if they did?" Another pause. Then, soft but certain, "Then I'll fight back too." A lump formed in my throat. Maybe, just maybe, I wasn't alone in this. Maybe, for the first time, I had someone on my side. And maybe, my parents were finally running out of people to manipulate. I sat in my car outside my apartment, gripping the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles ached. The world outside was quiet, but inside me, a storm was raging. My parents had taken everything they could from me, my money, my trust, my sense of security, and now they were scrambling, desperate. Because for the first time, I had taken something from them, their control, their power over me. And they were losing their minds over it. My phone had been ringing non-stop for hours. Calls from my mother, voicemails dripping with fake sweetness and forced concern. My father, switching between cold threats and guilt-tripping accusations. Even extended family members were now reaching out, probably fed some twisted version of the truth by my parents. I had ignored every single one. Then a text from Amy. "They're saying they might lose the house. They're freaking out." What's the plan? I stared at the message, my stomach twisting. I knew this was coming. When I cut them off financially, they had no backup plan. They had spent years living off me, using my money like their personal safety net, always assuming I would step in. But now they were drowning. And instead of taking responsibility, They were about to do what they always did, make it my problem. I took a deep breath, typed out a response. Not my problem, Amy. They made their choices. They can deal with the consequences. Her reply came almost instantly. Jose, I think they're serious. Dad is talking about coming to your job. I clenched my jaw so tightly my teeth hurt. Of course. This wasn't just about the money anymore. This was about control. About dragging me back in, forcing me to play the role I had been stuck in my whole life, the fixer, the provider, the daughter who always put her own needs last. I wasn't playing that role anymore. I grabbed my phone and dialed security at my office. Just in case. Hey, this is Jocelyn Carter, I said, my voice steady despite the fury bubbling beneath the surface. If anyone claiming to be my family shows up, do not let them in. I don't care what they say. They are not welcome. The guard on the other end, Mike, an older guy who had worked at the building for years, let out a low whistle. Damn, Jocelyn. That bad? You have no idea, I muttered. All right, he said. I got you. If they show up, they won't get past the front desk. I exhaled. Thank you. I hung up and stared at my reflection in the rearview mirror. My face was pale, my eyes sharper than I had ever seen them. There was no hesitation in them anymore. No doubt. Just resolve. I was done letting them control me. I got out of the car, walking up to my apartment with purpose. My mind was spinning with possibilities. How far would they go? How desperate were they? And, more importantly, what was their next move? I didn't have to wait long to find out. The moment I stepped inside, my phone buzzed again. A new message from my mother. Mom, Jocelyn, we need to talk. This has gone too far. We are still your parents. You can't just abandon us like this. I rolled my eyes. The audacity. Then another message. Mom, if you don't help, we will lose the house. Do you really want to be responsible for that? I scoffed. There it was. The ultimate guilt trip. And when I didn't respond, another text. Mom, your father isn't well. The stress is making him sick. He had chest pains today. I'm scared, Jocelyn. My hands clenched around my phone. I could practically hear her voice, shaking just enough to sound convincing, to plant that seed of doubt in my mind. Was he actually sick? Was she telling the truth? But then I remembered she had used this tactic before. Every single time I pulled away, every time I put up even the smallest boundary, suddenly my father had health issues. Suddenly my mother was a fragile woman on the verge of collapse. And yet, they always managed to recover just fine whenever I caved. Not this time. I set my phone down and walked to my kitchen, poured myself a cup of coffee, forcing myself to breathe through the rage. Then another buzz. A voicemail. I hesitated. Then, against my better judgment, I played it. My father's voice came through, low and dangerously calm. Jocelyn, I don't know what's gotten into you, but you need to stop this. Now. You're making a mistake. A pause, a slow, measured breath. We made sacrifices for you. We took care of you. We gave you everything. And this is how you repay us? You're destroying your family. I hope you understand that. I hope you understand what happens next is on you. I felt a chill run down my spine. Not because I was scared, but because it was so damn predictable. First, they begged. Then, they guilt-tripped. And when that didn't work, they threatened. I should have been furious. I should have thrown my phone across the room, screamed, cried, but instead, I laughed. A cold, hollow sound that filled my empty apartment. Because my father didn't realize something. He didn't have power over me anymore. I took my phone, deleted the voicemail, and blocked his number. Then I opened my banking app and pulled up the fraud report I had filed. And right there, in bold letters, was my confirmation. The investigation had officially begun. They had no idea what was coming for them. They thought they could manipulate me into submission. They thought they could scare me back into their control. They thought they could win. But they had already lost. And now, it was my turn to play the game. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the message on my phone. You're making a mistake, Jocelyn. You're destroying your family. My father's voice from the voicemail still echoed in my ears, thick with that same old manipulative authority he had always wielded over me. The threat was subtle, but I recognized it for what it was. I took a slow breath, steadying myself. They were desperate. And desperate people? They made mistakes. I wasn't afraid anymore. I was pissed. I grabbed my laptop and pulled up the fraud report confirmation. It was real. It was official. The bank had launched an investigation, and soon my parents would be forced to answer for what they had done. No more gaslighting, no more excuses, no more guilt tripping. The evidence was undeniable. They had stolen from me. Not just a little, not just out of necessity. They had drained me, all while living their lives like I was their personal ATM. A sudden knock at the door made me flinch. My heart lurched. They wouldn't. I stood, moving cautiously toward the peephole. A wave of relief washed over me. Amy. I unlatched the door and opened it just enough to see her face. Her expression was tight, her arms crossed. "We need to talk," she said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. I closed the door behind her. "What's going on?" She turned, shaking her head. "They're unraveling, Joss. I mean, really unraveling." I arched a brow. "Define unraveling." She sighed, pacing the room. "Mom's crying nonstop. Dad's furious, he's blaming me now, saying I should be talking sense into you." She scoffed. "Like that's even possible." I folded my arms. "And what did you tell them?" Amy hesitated. "I told them they're screwed." A slow smirk crept onto my lips. "Good." She let out a sharp breath. "Joss, I don't think you understand. They're really panicking. They're saying if you don't drop this, they could end up homeless. They called Aunt Carol, Uncle Ray, even Grandma. They're rallying everyone against you." I rolled my eyes. "Of course they are." Amy bit her lip. "Some of them believe them." I met her gaze, unshaken. "And some of them don't." She exhaled. "No, some of them don't." That was the shift, the real shift. My parents had spent years controlling the narrative, making themselves out to be the victims, the struggling parents who gave everything for their daughters. But now the truth was starting to leak through the cracks. I sat on the couch, leaning back. Let them panic. Let them scramble. They did this to themselves. Amy studied me for a long moment. "They don't think you'll go through with it," I scoffed. "Then they're dumber than I thought." She hesitated again, her voice dropping. "Joss, what if they do lose the house?" I didn't flinch. "Then they lose the house." She inhaled sharply. "Just like that?" I nodded. "Just like that." A beat of silence stretched between us. Amy shook her head. "Damn." I tilted my head. "What?" "You're really done," she murmured. I held her gaze. "Yeah, Amy, I am." She sat down beside me, rubbing her temples. "I don't know why it took me this long to see it, but we were never going to be enough for them, were we?" I swallowed hard. "Not the way we should have been." Amy sighed, staring at the floor. I checked my credit report. I turned to her sharply. "And?" Her lips pressed into a thin line. "They didn't open anything in my name." Relief coursed through me, but before I could say anything, she added, "Yet." We both knew it was only a matter of time. She leaned back, staring at the ceiling. "So what happens next?" I inhaled deeply. "They're going to keep trying. They'll push every button, pull every trick. But I'm not backing down." Amy turned her head toward me. "And if they try something worse?" I met her gaze, unwavering. "Then I'll be ready." Another beat of silence. Then her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen and groaned. "Speak of the devil." I raised a brow. "Mom or Dad? Both." I shook my head. "Decline." She hesitated for a split second, then did exactly that. It was a small victory, but a victory nonetheless. She looked at me again, something new in her expression. Respect, maybe. Or realization. "I wish I had your backbone," she admitted. I smirked. "Then grow one." She laughed, shaking her head. "Yeah, maybe I should." For the first time in forever, I felt like I wasn't fighting this battle alone. But we both knew it wasn't over yet. And when the final blow came, I was ready to end it for good. I sat in my car outside my apartment, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. The last few weeks had been a whirlwind, an unraveling of everything I thought I knew about my family, a brutal awakening to the truth I had spent years ignoring. The guilt they had used to control me, it was gone. The obligation I felt to fix their mistakes, gone. And yet, as I sat there, staring at my phone, at the unread messages piling up from my mother, my father, even extended family, I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, just exhaustion. A deep breath in, a slow exhale out. Then I tapped on the latest message from Amy. Amy, Mom's freaking out. Dad's not talking. They're saying they don't know what to do. They're saying they're losing everything. Thought you should know. I rested my head against the seat, letting the weight of those words settle. Losing everything. They had spent years taking from me, manipulating me, bleeding me dry. And now, with the well officially dry, reality was crashing down around them. My phone buzzed again. Mom, sweetheart, please, just talk to me. Then another. Dad, you don't understand what you're doing, Jocelyn. We're family. And another. Mom, your father isn't doing well. His health is declining. He hasn't been able to eat. Do you really want that on your conscience? I let out a bitter laugh. Of course. They were still trying to twist it, still trying to make me responsible for their suffering. But I wasn't buying it. Not anymore. I closed my messages and pulled up my banking app. Every joint account, closed. Every auto payment to their bills, canceled. The financial lifeline they had depended on for years, severed. And then, one final step. I tapped on my credit monitoring app and stared at the fraudulent account they had opened in my name. A $155,000 credit card balance. The last nail in the coffin. My thumb hovered over the screen. Report identity theft. A part of me hesitated. The last sliver of the daughter who had spent her whole life wanting to be loved, to be valued, to be seen. But that daughter was gone. I pressed the button. Just like that, it was over. I placed my phone down on the passenger seat, my pulse steady, my breathing even. The weight I had carried for so long, the crushing, suffocating guilt was finally lifting. I had spent my entire life trying to be the good daughter, the reliable one, the one who fixed everything. But the truth was, my parents had never loved me for me. They had loved what I could provide, what I could sacrifice. Without my money, without my constant support, they had nothing. And that wasn't my problem anymore. I started my car and pulled out of the parking lot. The sun was setting, the sky a deep orange, the city bathed in fading light. It was fitting, really. The end of a chapter. A few minutes later, I pulled up to Rose's house. She answered the door before I even knocked, a knowing look in her eyes. "It's done," I said. She stepped aside, letting me in. "How do you feel?" I thought about it for a moment, then shrugged. "Free," she smiled. "Good." I followed her into the kitchen, where she had already poured 2 glasses of wine. She handed me one, then raised hers in a silent toast. "To freedom?" she asked. I clinked my glass against hers. "To freedom." We sat in silence for a while, the tension in my body finally starting to ease. It was strange, the quiet. For so long, my life had been filled with noise, my parents' demands, their expectations, the never-ending cycle of their needs outweighing mine. And now, for the first time in my life, I had peace. And then, my phone buzzed again. I groaned, already reaching to silence it, but Rose grabbed my wrist. "Wait," she said. "Look." I glanced at the screen. "Mom, I know you hate me right now, and I don't blame you. But I just need you to know, I'm sorry. For everything." I stared at the message, waiting for the manipulation, the guilt, the twist. But it didn't come, just that, "I'm sorry." And for the first time, I believed her. It didn't change anything. It didn't erase what they had done. But maybe, just maybe, It meant something. I placed my phone down and took another sip of wine. "Are you going to respond?" Rose asked. I shook my head. "No, not yet." She nodded as if she understood. And maybe she did. The truth was, I didn't need closure from my parents. I didn't need their validation, their approval, their love, because for the first time in my life, I was finally giving it to myself. And that was enough. They thought I'd always be their safety net, that I'd keep funding their lies. But in the end, they lost everything while I walked away free. No more guilt, no more control, just me, choosing myself for the first time. What do you think? Was I too harsh? Or did they deserve it? Would you have handled it differently? Comment below. And if you've ever been in a toxic situation like this, hit like and subscribe because, trust me, you're not alone. This is your sign to take back your power. In America, we're taught that family comes first, but what happens when family takes everything and gives nothing in return? I learned the hard way that love isn't measured in sacrifice. Setting boundaries isn't cruel, it's survival. Financial independence is more than just money, it's freedom, control, and self-respect. If someone only values you for what you can provide, they don't truly value you. No one has the right to guilt you into poverty for the sake of family. Protect yourself. Walk away if you have to, because in the end, choosing yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary.